is great to be back with you to do a series that is a continuation of a previous series, as you just mentioned. So here we are for America's 11th hour, and I'll mention what that previous one was and how you can catch up if you didn't get that the first time around. But our first meeting together tonight of 4 is entitled The Pilgrims in Providence and Prophecy. Now, I don't know how many of you guys were alive in 1976. I wasn't, just barely, but I grew up in the decade that followed, and my mom would give me these quarters that had the bicentennial on it. How many of you remember the bicentennial celebration of 1976? That was a big year. That was a big event. And what is that bicentennial about? What is that celebrating? Well, the 200-year anniversary of the what? Do you know? The Declaration of Independence, which was signed in what year? 1776. Now there were parades, there were special quarters minted, as I mentioned. There were media specials and news specials and history specials, and everybody was talking about the 200th anniversary, because that was a big event. Well, there was a big anniversary just recently in 2020. And do you know what that 400th year anniversary was? It was the landing of the Pilgrims on the Mayflower at Plymouth Rock in 1620. Now, I didn't hear anything about that last year, and having grown up in a Christian school, learning to love and appreciate history, all sorts of different expressions of American history particularly, from black history to the founding fathers to the civil rights movement, and yes, of course, to the Pilgrims. Did you dress up as the Pilgrims and Indians as kids? That's fun stuff, right? And I think most people, at least who are watching this, who grew up in America, had a similar experience to that, and maybe you didn't even know that last year. 2020. I know I'm dating this program. If you're watching this in the future, it's still as relevant as ever. We can always look back on that year, kind of like we looked back on 2017 as the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, which began in 1517. But, you know, it was a little bit of a dark irony, kind of rubbing it in, I guess, that the 400th anniversary of the first Protestant worship services held there in Plymouth, Massachusetts. 400 years later, we had government shutdowns of churches, worship services banned. It's interesting that 300 years from that 1620, alcohol was prohibited. You remember prohibition? You remember learning about that in the 1920s? Well, what was prohibited and what was permitted in 2020? The liquor stores were open, and the forced closure of churches with the deeming of worship as a non-essential activity. Well, the free exercise of religion is something that we cherish.